Good morning. I hope you're well. My name is Jerome, and I am on this channel, Spirituality 2. It is the 1st of March, 2021. It is a sunny day again. That's like 2 or 3 almost sunny days in a row here along the Oregon coast. And when the sun hits, everything grows because it's been getting plenty of water. Moss grows it's the most amazing thing. I'm Jerome Hebert on Facebook. And yesterday I just went around in the woods a little bit and just took pictures of the lichens and the mosses and such that are growing everywhere. But your typical tree will, once it gets 20 years, 30 years old, will get this green moss on it, and then the green moss will grow that bearded white moss, and on the nooks and crooks of trees, I've seen actual ferns growing up out of the tree. So the tree has its own whole ecosystem. It is accepting of everything. It doesn't complain about it, it just grows because it's a tree. It pays attention to the laws of its own being and follows accordingly, and therefore is successful. Slowly and steadily. That's the point. Slow and steady. One foot in front of the other. So, I've been in my own personal struggle, really trying to learn to, like I've been saying, forgive, forget, and move on from things. And I still am catching myself becoming encircled, if you will, in the holding on to, in the resentment, in the anger of the moment, in the passion of the moment. Losing my center, losing the sweet Jerome, and out comes the egotistical asshole, in my opinion. You know what they say about opinions. We all got one and they all smell. So, pardon me for a minute. I gotta take a handful of pharmaceutical drugs to keep myself from having seizures. And now, 45 minutes from now, my center of balance will go away. It's like I get cross-eyed from this drug, but not like this. It's like this. And so everything feels like I can't get a center with my eyes. My inner ear, wash that all the way down. My inner ear says this is up, but my eyes are going, And so the effect is kind of like spinning around in a circle. To my body, it feels like I'm spinning around in a circle. I guess they would stereotypically call that dizziness. I call it, hold on to something and just wait for a minute and it'll pass, and it generally does. But yeah, that's my mission with my life with pharmaceuticals. It's either that or have tonic-clonic seizures and bite my tongue and hurt myself. And I broke 2 vertebrae having a seizure, so it's not to be taken lightly, epilepsy. There's a whole story behind that one, my friends. So I find myself battling against these momentary excitations, and I'm coming to realize that it's not about the individual that I'm getting upset about. It's not what they're doing that's upsetting me. What's upsetting me is my own inner voice that I've talked to you guys about that is saying, well, it should be this way, or it should be done that way, or if you did it that way, it would be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anything but the way that you want to do it, you know. And so what that is that is my ego, my ego stepping in. The small child, which is basically saying, no, 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 I want it this way, and is ready to throw a fit to get it his way. And sometimes you will, and sometimes you won't. That's, in my opinion, the really almost the very definition of what the ego is. The ego is like that inner child that is not capable of analysis, kind of like the young fool, that we talked about in Youthful Folly the other day. And one who has not acquired the wisdom to be able to wait, which was yesterday's chapter. And so what happens is the inner child / fool combats with the adult, rational, reasonable person. And it's basically, they go head to head in some ways. It's like your rational voice gets pushed to the back of your mind, and the ego comes forward. And the ego is like, well, no, it should be this way and this way, and this is the way it needs to be. Well, the rational voice in the back of your mind, you can't hear it, but it's saying, well, does it really make that much of a difference? And come on, is this worth this amount of energy that you're putting out? What's the payoff here? Come on, man, calm down. And oftentimes as humans, we push that voice even farther back, and the ego itself takes control, and we become embroiled, if you will, in hatred and passion and looping through your brain. And you know what I'm talking about. You can't make it stop. You don't want to make it stop. It feels good. It's like scratching an itch on your nuts. It's like, oh yeah. I don't care if it's disgusting. It feels good. And so one thing that I've done is I've felt that it's very helpful to me when I get to the point where the ego is in control and the small child is at the surface, and when I hear myself going, okay, it's a little breath like that communicates so much to the person you're with. That communicates so many words, that one gesture. Somebody's like, no, I think you should do it this way. And you go, okay. What you're saying is, fuck you, but I'll do it anyway to that person. It is disrespectful. And so I have to say, well, give me an example of somebody who has overcome, if you will, their ego, who has really grown up and put the ego in its real proper place, which is back there to want to make us look good and be clean and be polite and be accepted, be loved. That's what the real purpose of the ego is self-amelioration. It is a way to encourage yourself through feeling, if you will, entitled. And that can be good and that can be bad. If you didn't have any ego, you wouldn't even bother to take a shower, or for that matter, even wipe your butt. You would just like, whatever. Just like an animal, and poop and move on, You wouldn't give a damn if anybody liked you or not, because you wouldn't like yourself. That's the strangest phenomenon. So the ego is important. But it's important if it's put in its proper place. And I thought, well, give me an example of somebody who's accomplished this. And the one person through history that I know of, that I can think of, that has accomplished that, Jesus Christ, quite frankly. Jesus Christ, it was never, ever, 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 ever about Jesus and how Jesus felt, okay? And Jesus completely disconnected from his ego. He gave his will and his life to his Father. I mean, Jesus to start with was a miracle. You know, if the scriptures are to be believed, he was born under some sort of a single star phenomenon event and of a virgin. So his mother was a virgin, yet he was conceived. So he was conceived somehow, magically. You know, the creative works with the receptive. So Jesus went through life. It was never about him, never about him. You never heard, well, Jesus was cold, or Jesus was angry because somebody hurt his feelings. You know, all through the whole thing, it was like, if someone strikes you, then just turn the other cheek. It's not about me. You need to give it up. You need to give it all up. That means your ego. That's what he was talking about. Egotism separates us from God. And in that case, and in that state, it is productive of nothing but evil. It pulls you directly away from God, and it creates God within yourself. It makes you believe that you are the master of your universe, that you are the controller of your destiny. Are you? Really? You may make certain decisions and choices, but what brought you to do that in the first place? This is what Jesus understood. He understood it's not about me. I have a course I was born into, and I'm not God. I'm not the Savior. Yeah. And apologies to any Christians that I may have just offended, but Jesus wasn't God. Jesus was a man that was working through God, that a man that managed to completely eliminate his own ego. Just about. He wore basically rags. He never, very rarely, I think, had shoes. He might have had some homemade sandals, but they probably broke apart pretty quick. And so he spent a lot of his time really in harsh conditions. And it was okay with him, because whatever the will of God is, that's what he was going to try to do. And he was going to try to, in any way he could, be able to perceive what the will of God is, which is difficult. And he would even tell you that. If you were to ask Jesus, if you were to say to Jesus, man, you fed 1,000 or 10,000 people with one loaf and one fish, it's pretty damn amazing, you know. You're a miracle worker, Jesus. You brought a man back from the dead? You cured blindness, leprosy? You're a miracle worker. You know what Jesus would say? He would go, you know what? No, it's not about me. I had nothing to do with that. It was God. That is what Jesus would do. And so what I've been trying to, when I get myself into those situations, I'm forcing myself to just stop the cycle and ask myself, well, what would Jesus do? in my estimation of maybe what he would do. What would he do? And every time it's the direct opposite. Because I analyze, why am I upset? Why is this upsetting me? Well, because my feelings are hurt, basically. Because it's not being done the way I want it to be done. It's not turning out the way I wanted it to turn out. It's a bad thing. It's a disaster. It's horrible. And I am the victim. Never once does the ego say, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Not once. So I guess it is a struggle. It is a battle. It is not easy. But it's a process. And I think, once again, one foot in front of the other. And just like the I Ching has been leading us through this evolution that I've been reading, from the beginning to now, past childhood into waiting, into the adulthood, into learning to wait, into learning to let go and let life happen. And instead of trying to control it with what we think is right, what I think is right. Internalize all of this. I'm not going to say you need to do this and you need to do that. I'm going to come to it from the angle of this is things that I need to take care of, and these are things I need to battle with. If you want to listen and if you want to battle along with me, I'd appreciate a comment. But yeah, the ego is the opposite of God. If you learn to suppress your ego, put it in its proper place, you will become closer to God. And good things will just start happening because you're allowing them to, instead of controlling the situation. To control the situation is not what God would want. He'd want you maybe to maintain it, but not control it. So yeah, to the very end, it was never about Jesus and his feelings. For instance, when he went into the temple and all the, I guess it was like a flea market setup kind of a thing. People with their tables and booths and wares and goods and making money off of the temple, basically, and not pitching into the temple and not helping with the path that God would choose. And so he wasn't like, oh man, that makes me angry. He didn't say, that makes me angry, I'm going to tear this whole place apart. Even though, think about it, even though I may go to jail, I may get crucified, etc., etc. It's legally a criminal thing to go through and bash all these people's crap up. It would be considered assault and this and that, not a good thing. But he didn't say, because I have my feelings hurt. It's like, how dare you do this to my Father's house? He was expressing the anger of God, not the anger that he felt. And he was willing to take a huge risk. I mean, imagine if a couple of those where people had a sword, some nunchucks, a club, and he's on the table next to theirs and getting ready to come to theirs, and it's like, you know what? And he knew that. But though he may have walked through the valley of the shadow of death, he feared no evil. He fought against no evil. God funneled through him to do some fighting against evil, but not really. Because if we fight evil, we lose again. In the end, we lose. You can't fight evil on its own grounds. You can't fight the ego on its own grounds. Finally, the only way that you can combat evil, really, is to make energetic progress in the good. My name is Jerome, and this is Spirituality 2. Have a good morning.